Serious. Reddit. What are your creepy encounters with something that you are convinced was paranormal? Posted 1 day ago. Please do like, share, and subscribe. I was helping my dad clean my grandma's house after she passed, and I went in and was trying to find a song on my phone, and before I could, I heard a cough, plain as day, come from down the hallway where her room was. She died of lung and throat cancer. It was pretty crazy. I went to the Betsy Ross house as a really little kid in the early 90s. Normal house, but I was confused why the tour guide never talked about the woman on the chair crying at the edge of the bed in Betsy Ross's bedroom, so I asked about it. No one else saw the woman at the edge of the bed. I figured it was just a wax museum since there was a wax statue of a man in uniform rolling bullets in the basement. Years later, I was looking at haunted Philadelphia tours to go on with a friend, and the Betsy Ross house was on it. I was like, whoa, I was there, and looked into it some more. Turns out there is a woman at the end of the bed crying and a uniformed man in the basement that people have reported seeing. There is no way that 8-year-old me would have known about either of those things. So, my workplace is haunted. I was having a really shit day, and as a cleaner, it's normal that me and my coworker will be the only ones left at night. So I was standing on the second floor, leaning on the banister for the staircase, when I heard this male voice say in my ear, "You alright?" Clear as day. I turned around so fast, and nobody was there, and it scared the hell out of me. When I was a young child, I had an imaginary friend who I would sit up with at night and speak to at length. My mother would have to come in every night and tell me to go to bed, to much protest, until she said goodnight to my friend as well. This went on for years. I would speak to my friend, a monk, a dark-cloaked figure, who had no real features I can remember, but would sit on the end of my bed quite peacefully. This went on for so long, my mother got concerned, as I wasn't growing out of the phase of having an imaginary friend. So she had me checked from the neck up, to which I was proven to be as perfectly sane as any ordinary child. The paranormal part of this is that no one ever saw him until one night one of my aunts stayed over and I had to give up my room for her. In the dead of the night, she screamed the house awake, ran down the stairs so quick she missed a step, fell down the stairs and near broke her ankle. Just a very nasty sprain if I correctly recall. Whilst waiting for her to calm down, she apparently exclaimed about a dark figure in my room with her. In the midst of all this, she refused to go back upstairs, and I was kicked from the sofa back to my room, to which a groggy me just said, "Told you, come on Ben, time for bed," with a sense of elation of being proven sane. Later research into the house revealed we lived on the grounds of a former monastery. We moved that summer, and I never saw my friend again. My best friend and his wife moved to a new apartment. I came over to visit a few times, and each time I'd see the motion of a cat in my peripheral vision. Not the image of a cat, but a sense of how a cat moves. Anyway, one day I finally cracked some joke about the ghost cat in the place, and his wife was instantly saying, See, I told you we had a ghost cat." I once saw someone short walk by me in my house. They walked into the laundry room, which only has one way in. I walked into it behind them, and they were gone. I thought it was my little brother, but I went to his room and he was asleep. I still have no clue what that was. This might end up getting long, but I'll try to make it worth the read. One morning I awoke suddenly. It was a beautiful summer morning. The sun was streaming in the windows, curtains blowing gently in a breeze, birds chirping happily outside. I had a moment of total peace. Then I turned my head and saw a figure standing by the bed. It was a Hispanic lady, dressed in a formal red dress. She looked a lot like the actress Elizabeth Pena. She was looking down at me with an expression that I can only describe as absolute adoration. I remember thinking, oh no, she's confused me for someone else, and then just laying there, convinced that if I spoke, she would realize her mistake and be embarrassed. This went on for about 10 minutes. This woman looking at me like I was her cherished offspring. Then I blinked, and everything was gone. It was dark, and the glow of the moon on the snow outside lit up the room. It had just been a dream. A strange dream, but a dream nonetheless. I managed to forget about it the next day, and so I was surprised the next morning when I awoke suddenly. Bright sunlight was streaming through the window. The curtains rippled in a gentle breeze and birds sang sweetly outside. I turned to look beside me, and there she was. She was kneeling beside the bed, arms crossed on the mattress, and her head resting in her arms. Again, She looked at me with such pure love and adoration that I just laid there and basked in it. Although I was still sure she had mistaken me for someone else, we stayed that way even longer this time, maybe 20 minutes. And then I blinked, and I was once again in reality, where it was still lit and still winter. I mulled over the dream the next day, wondering at what it meant. I was convinced my subconscious was trying to tell me something. That night, I was anxious to fall asleep and dream, and so when I woke to the sun streaming in, the curtains waving in a gentle breeze, and the birds chirping merrily, I thought I was prepared. I laid for a moment, enjoying the sights and sounds, before turning to where I knew the lady would be. And there she stood, beside the bed. But this was different. She was screaming, her face screwed up in an anxious grimace. She waved her arms frantically, but no sound came from her. It was like I was watching a movie on mute. She continued to try to scream, waving her hands in a desperate pleading motion. She looked as though she was about to cry. I looked back at her in confusion, unsure what was happening. She stopped her frantic waving and looked defeated. And then, a look came across her face. She raised her hands above her head and brought her fists together. Before I knew what was happening, she brought them down with all her might right on my solar plexus. I woke up gasping, struggling to sit up, struggling to breathe, wheezing as my lungs tried to fill with air again. Back in reality, it's still night and it is still winter. Once I can breathe, I continue to sit up in bed, traumatized by what's just happened. I'm terrified, but mostly because the lady's behavior had changed so drastically. I cannot calm myself, and so I continue to sit up, breathe slowly and deeply. And at some point, I realize that I am feeling a slight shudder in the bed. Every 10 or 15 seconds, I listen closely but cannot hear any sounds over the fan that is running in the corner. But the shudder comes again. I reach down to put my hands on the bed frame and confirm that something is indeed shaking the bed very gently. I quietly and slowly get out of bed. Trailing my hand along the bed frame, I make my way to the foot of the bed. The sweater chest that sits against the footboard prevents me from keeping contact with the bed frame, but I continue to my husband's side of the bed. As I round the sweater chest, the moon reflecting against the snow outside the window offers a dim light, enough to see a dark shadow wedged between the sweater chest and the footboard. I watch as the shape twitches and shudders, my mind not able to make sense of what I'm seeing, and finally, thinking I must still be dreaming, I reach out to touch the shadow. It's my dog. He's tried to retrieve a toy from between the bed and the chest, but had got his collar caught in the decorative scrollwork of the footboard. He's twitching and shuddering because he is slowly choking to death. I scream and awaken my husband, who ends up having to retrieve a knife to cut the collar off. He's managed to twist it perfectly around the breakaway portion so that it cannot work. We get him free and sit for hours holding him and crying, afraid to leave him for a moment. He survives without any issue, but I'm haunted by the dream of the lady in red. Yes, I know it's likely that my subconscious had picked up on the vibrations of my dog's struggles and crafted something in my dream to startle me awake. Except for the fact that I have suffered extremely vivid nightmares for my entire life. Had I only had the final dream, I would have done what I did every time I have a nightmare, roll over and go back to sleep. I only stayed awake that night because the first two dreams had made me start to trust the lady, and so when she so desperately struck out at me, it bothered me on a very deep level, much deeper than any nightmare ever has before or since. Why did she come to me at all? I'll never know, but I believe that she hadn't, we would not have found my dog until it was far too late. This happened when I was in middle school around 2002-2003. I was playing with a Ouija board with a friend on the bunk bed in my bedroom that I shared with my little sister. My friend and I were on the top bunk playing and connected with a spirit. Being skeptical and wanting to scare ourselves, we kept asking the spirit to prove to us that they were really there. My friend bravely volunteered to put a hair tie on her outstretched finger and hang her arm out over the edge of the bunk bed. We asked the spirit to lift up the hair tie, slide it off her finger, and drop it to the ground. Whatever we were speaking to, they obliged, because this hair tie levitated off of my friend's finger and suspended itself in the air for a few seconds before sliding off of her finger and dropping to the floor. My friend did not do anything to make the hair tie act the way it did. There's no way she could have done it because we tried to replicate it afterwards. Needless to say, it really spooky. We got the scare we were looking for. It wasn't too long after that, my parents confiscated the Ouija board, and I haven't messed around with one since. Ouija boards give a new meaning to fuck around and find out. I remember as a young kid, I usually used to sit in my bed and watch TV with my room door open while the adjacent guest bedroom next to mine would always have the door shut. I always remember seeing that door fully open and close by itself multiple times a day, very slowly and gently. Never really bothered me much now that I think about it, but there were other creepier experiences I had in the same house that made me feel uncomfortable, like I was being watched. I worked graveyard shift in a dementia ward for 4 years, and it was anything but quiet. I was working with a nurse one night when we both heard a resident say, "Excuse me." We looked around and no one was there. I checked on the resident in question, and she was fast asleep in her own room. Many of us also experienced someone whistling in the ward late at night, and one nurse even managed to catch a video of it happening. It was unnerving, to say the least. I'm still not sure if this was paranormal or I was gullible as hell, but it creeped the shit out of me. Back in 2003, I was in Scotland for a 2-week trip. It was a program for international students at a university, forgot which. I was assigned a shared bedroom with another girl from my country. This girl was obsessed with roses. She had roses in every single one of her clothes. She had rose pendants, rose earrings, roses everywhere. And she was obsessed with the paranormal too. Now, going into Scotland as a 13-year-old, we were told the place was full of ghost stories and stuff. I don't know, we were dumb kids. So this girl was right in her zone. She starts asking me to take pictures of the creepy-looking basement. It was an analog camera back then, and no way I was going to waste a photo with that, because someone had told her a kid had died there. You know, rumors spread to scare kids. She used to tell little stories about stuff like, I don't know, spiritism or whatever, like how she had some sort of sixth sense. I don't know, it was a long time ago. Anyway, those were the two things she was obsessed with, roses and paranormal. Then one day, she tells me why she's obsessed with roses. Apparently, she used to have a sister. The child passed away very young, I think as a toddler, still around 2 years old. This girl was obviously gutted. Then one day, she claims to have looked up at the sky and said, "Sis, if you're there, send me a rose." And when she looked down, she found something with a rose on it. I think it was a spoon with a rose engraved. Anyway, me and my friends at the time, being dumbass kids, were thoroughly creeped by this kid. The story, albeit sad, didn't help, especially for the amount of roses she wore. Seriously, it was everywhere. One night, I'm sleeping in my bed. I wake up out of nowhere. I look around, nothing's going on. Girl is sleeping in the bed next to me. Then, all of a sudden, my pillow gets pulled just a little. I look to my side, but she's still there sound asleep. And my pillow gets pulled again, and again, and again. Just little by little, like somebody was trying to snatch that pillow from under my head. I was wide awake, couldn't explain what the hell was happening and just froze. I pulled my covers to my neck and waited until morning. The pillow pulling just went on for about half an hour, I think, and then stopped. Then came the second night. Our bedroom had a sink in it, where we brushed our teeth before bed, obviously. That day, we foreign kids had decided to buy the most touristic thing possible, a red plaid hat with horns and ginger braids, because we just thought that was the most Scottish thing in the world. I had set mine on the sink and just left it there. The girl and I were talking, and this was the end of our trip, like the last week. We had maybe 3 days left, and then we were going back home. By now, everyone was spooked by this girl. She just had a vibe. If the constant stories, the insistence on finding paranormal shit, and her going on and on about roses and her dead sister wasn't enough, I'm saying this because by this point, there was some animosity. I got along all right with her, but most of the others didn't. She wasn't being excluded, but there was a weird vibe in the air, which, to this day, if I try to find a logical explanation with the paranormal one, this is the one. So this night, I turn around, glaze at my stupid Scottish tourist bait hat, and I swear on the Lord, one of the braids was just fucking floating in the air. It was like someone was pulling the ribbon and lifting it like it would be a marionette. It even shuddered a little, like it could barely hold. At that moment, I swear to God, I said, "Oh fuck no." Grabbed a pillow, knocked on my friend's room, and said, "Scoot, I'm sleeping here tonight." I remember telling the girl what I had seen, and she wasn't bothered in the slightest. She was just like, "Oh, okay," and moved along. I didn't even care that I left her there. To this day, I can't explain this, and a greater part of me is honestly willing to believe I was just a gullible, impressionable, dumbass 13-year-old. But a part of me kept thinking, this was the girl's sister, wasn't it? I made fun of the roses thing, and she taunted me. For years, I stuffed that stupid plaid hat deep inside a box and couldn't even look at it. I was a fully formed adult when I finally brought the hat out and had the courage to touch it again. I swear, for years, it was like I was expecting it to move again. Not fun. Never seen that girl again either. When I was 5, I remember getting home from my grandpa's birthday party. For context, my mom was pregnant with my brother at the time, so my parents had already bought the crib. I woke up in the middle of the night to find a woman in a white dress and long black hair standing over my brother's crib. I managed to wake up my dad so he could take me to the bathroom. When I got back, it was still there. It was only until morning when it disappeared. Every now and then, I see a glance of what I assume is the thing running past the backyard. I slept over at a friend's house to play video games. It was just the two of us. During the night, I found an old porcelain doll and grabbed it. My friend, who was never serious about anything, asked me to leave it alone. I asked what the problem was, if it was just a doll, and he went on to explain that the little doll belonged to his mother, who received it as a gift from her grandmother some 30 years ago. He said every time someone touched the doll, weird stuff happened in the house, flickering lights and noises, but nothing more. I thought it was weird, but I didn't make much of it. Anyway, fast forward to 6 a.m. It was time to leave for work. There's a little metal door below the stairs that prevented my friend's little sister from going upstairs. She was a toddler back then. So as we were walking downstairs at 6 a.m., this little fence just smashes as hard as possible right in front of our eyes. We looked at each other and couldn't believe what we had just seen. Needless to say, we left the house literally running until we were a block away from it. To this date, this is the only instance in my life where I can say, yep, that was pretty much paranormal.